So we added a lot of functionality to our app. We still have the behavior that if we are logged in and we reload the page, the login state is lost. The reason for this is that when we refresh the page, we download the single page application again, we download the JavaScript again, it gets executed again. It's a totally new application when we look at it like this. Therefore, our state stored in Redux, which is in the end just stored in JavaScript, is of course lost. So we need to persist our login state across our sessions. And this requires a browser API we can use, localStorage. Now let's see how we can utilize localStorage in this lecture. I'll go to my auth action creator here where we do successfully log in and dispatch auth success. There we also pass on the token. And it would make sense to also store that token in our browser local storage then. The local storage API is baked into the browser, so we can easily use it. We can either use it here in our auth action creator or in auth success before we dispatch an action. There we could run some additional code. We get the token here, but I don't want to work with just the token. I also want to work with the expiration time. So what I'll do is I'll set the token here in my auth action creator where we dispatch auth success and auth timeout. There I'll also access local storage, just like that. It's built into JavaScript. And we can call setItem on it to store an item in the local storage. The item I want to store is my token, let's say, and that's just the key by which we can fetch it. The second argument to setItem is the actual item, and this is response data ID token, extracted from our response, just as we do it here. Now that's nice, but the token alone won't be that useful if we fetch it in the future. We also need to know when it expires. So I'll store something else, setItem, and I could store expires in, but that's just the amount of seconds until it's invalid. That won't tell us much the next time we fetch this from local storage, because the number of course won't update. So instead we should store the expiration date. So expiration date, and the value should be the expiration date. Now I'm going to calculate this and store it in a separate constant. Expiration date can be calculated as new date, which gives us the current date, plus the expiration time, so response data expires in, times 1000, because JavaScript time works in milliseconds and the time we got was in seconds. But just like that, it won't work. Instead, on the new date we generated, we have to extract getTime. It's a function, gives us the current time of the date. And now this gives us the expiration time, but to turn this into a date object again, we have to wrap all of that with new date. So new date without arguments, like here, gives us the current date. New date with arguments gives us a date with the date we pass as an argument. So here, this will be the current date plus 10 seconds, plus expiry time in seconds. So this is how that works. Now we can store expiration date in our local storage too whenever we acquire a token. Before we continue, let's see if that works. Let's go back to our browser, click on Authenticate, switch to Sign In, and let's authenticate here, Submit. And we can inspect our local storage in the Chrome browser DevTools by going to the Application tab there. On the Application tab, you will find some storage information, and you can click on local storage and expand it, and click on your domain. You see the two fields we set, token and expiration date, which is your local date time, which makes sense for that given user, where you have your, date where this is going to expire. And I can say that for me, this date is true here. So this is our expiration date, and we can now take advantage of these two fields to check them whenever our application loads, to log the user in if we got a token and if it's still valid, so if we haven't passed the expiration date yet. Otherwise, we want to clean this up. And we want to clean this up with the logout dispatch action. So in the auth file in the actions folder where we have logout, there I also want to access local storage, and I simply want to remove my two items here. So I want to remove the token and I want to remove the expiration time, because both is not needed anymore and shouldn't be stored anymore. We aren't logged in anymore, so the token will not be valid in the future. So now let's fetch that token when we log in. Where can we check this? Well, we should check it when the application loads. So for example, in app.js, this is the root component of our app, and it's always loaded no matter which route we visit. So therefore, this makes for a great app to check our authentication status. For checking this, we will need a new action. So let's go to the auth file in the actions folder. And there I essentially want to dispatch auth success whenever we are logged in, but also execute or dispatch check auth timeout and pass the expiration in amount to still have that functionality going. For that, I'll create a new action creator in the auth.js file. I'll name it auth check state, for example. I won't receive any arguments here, but I will return a function here so that I can dispatch multiple actions. I won't run asynchronous code, but I still want to dispatch multiple actions from within this action. And then here, I want to get my token from local storage with getItem token, and I want to get my expiration time. Now, before I do that, if token is null, so if we can't validate this to be truish, then I just want to return in the end, because I don't need to do anything here. I don't need to dispatch anything. I could dispatch the logout function, but that also shouldn't be required. But still, I will call dispatch logout like this. So in the else case that we got a token, I'll also fetch the expiration time and store it in a constant expiration time. I'll reach out to local storage and get my item. Expiration time was the identifier we used for storing it here, expiration date. So let's fix this expiration date here. We should also remove expiration date up here then in the logout action creator though. So expiration date all over the place. With that updated, we got it stored here in a constant. We got the token stored in a constant. Now we can use both pieces of information. And I want to dispatch my auth success action creator because I know that we are logged in. However, I only want to do this if we haven't passed the expiration date. So what I'll do is I'll first of all wrap this with new date, because what we retrieve from local storage will be a string, but with new date we can convert it into a date object. And then I'll check if expiration date is actually greater than new date, which is now. If that's the case, then I don't want to log in. So in this case, I also want to dispatch logout. Else, and of course you could restructure this a bit to have less nested if-else statements, but here I'll leave it like this. Else, I know the expiration date is still in the future. Now I want to dispatch auth success, pass on my token, and I need the user ID here. Now for that, I'll need to fetch it. Of course, we could also simply store it in local storage, and that wouldn't be wrong. You can, however, also send a request to the Firebase Auth API to get it from there. If you have a look at the Firebase Auth API documentation, there you'll see that you can get user data by sending a request to this endpoint with your API key and the ID token as a body payload, because this is a post request even though it's called get user data. It's a bit strange. So this would be a way to get the user data. In the response, you would have a user's object, which actually is an array. And in the first element of the array, you would have your user, and local ID would be the user ID. So this is how you could fetch it from the server. I, however, will simply store it in local storage because it's a bit easier here. So for that, let's make sure that we also store this in our auth action creator. Once we got the response, there I'll reach out to local storage, set a item user ID, and store response data. Local ID is the user ID there. And also remove that, of course, if we log out. So remove user ID. And with that, we can fetch it in our case here. We can fetch the user ID if we are logged in. So here const user ID will be local storage get item user ID. And now I can pass this as a second argument to auth success. Now the last thing I want to do is I also want to dispatch this other action check auth timeout. And there I need to pass an argument which is the amount of seconds until we should be logged out. Expiration date, however, of course, is the time when we are logged out, not the amount of seconds. What we can do though is we can simply pass expiration date get seconds minus new date get seconds. So this is simply passing the difference between the future date and how many seconds this are. So the future date in seconds, that's a big number, and the current date in seconds. And the difference, of course, is the expiry date, the expiry time in seconds, I mean. So with that, we're dispatching everything here in auth check state. So this is a pure utility action creator, which dispatches a couple of other actions depending on our current state. And with that, we can dispatch auth check state to successfully automatically log the user in if we have a valid token. Let's see if this works by going to the app.js container. And there I first of all need to import connect to be able to dispatch anything from this container. So let's import connect from React Redux. And then here at the bottom, before I export the app, I'll create map dispatch to props, receive that dispatch function, and there return my JavaScript object where I do map my props. Here I'll add the on try auto sign up prop, for example, and I'll dispatch this one action we just created, which I therefore also need to export in the index.js file in my actions folder. So there I'll add my check or my auth check state argument, my auth check state action creator we created a second ago. And that is the action I want to dispatch in the app container. So here I'll reach out to my actions, which I first of all need to import at the top. So import everything as actions from that actions file in the store actions index file here. So this actions object contains all the exported action creators. So here we can then reach out to actions auth check state like this. Now we just have to connect our container. So connect, pass map dispatch to props, and pass null for map state to props because we're not mapping any state to props here. And now let's execute this, for example, in component did mount. There, let's call this props on try auto sign up. With that, if we save everything, let's try this out. Now, if we are on that page and click on authenticate, you see that doesn't work. We see in the Redux DevTools that auth logout was dispatched, which makes a lot of sense because it means that our on try auto signup was dispatched and that we made it into this auth check state action creator therefore, but that we didn't find a token, and there indeed isn't one in my local storage right now, and therefore logout was dispatched. However, why can't we reach authenticate now? Let's have a look at this in the next lecture.